Why are Canadian and American diplomats suffering a mysterious, unknown disease when they go to Havana?
Welcome to Plain English, the podcast that goes at the right speed for English language learners. Listen now and read the transcript online at plainenglish.com. Now, here's Jeff, your host for today's episode.
About 36 American and Canadian diplomats have suffered hearing loss, headaches, and even brain damage while working in Havana. Doctors are puzzled because their symptoms are not consistent with any known disease, and it only affects Americans and Canadians, only diplomats, and only in Havana and China. Welcome back to Plain English. I'm Jeff. JR is the producer, and we are on episode number 118 together. You know the details by now. Plain English is a podcast for English learners. We talk about current events, things going on in the world, but we do it at a speed that's a little slower so you can follow along. You can hear every word. And if you need a little extra help, well, that's why we have the transcripts online. Today's transcript is available at plainenglish.com/118. And over there, you'll find translations of the hardest words are available for Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, French, Italian, and Japanese. JR and I love hearing from listeners, so send us a note to Jeff, Jeff, at plainenglish.com and JR at plainenglish.com. Those are our email addresses. Tell us where you're from, why you listen, and don't be shy about writing either. You can write in English or Spanish, but don't be shy about writing. Don't be embarrassed if it's not perfect. Picture this, a mysterious disease that doctors can't fully diagnose that hits only people in a certain profession. It only affects people from the US and Canada, and only when they're living or traveling abroad. It sounds like something out of a spy novel, but it's a real thing. It's known as Havana syndrome, and it's a vexing problem facing United States and Canadian diplomats living in Cuba and China. Here's what happens. People working for the United States or Canadian embassies or consulates in Havana, the capital of Cuba, hear these loud noises at home and suddenly get headaches. They feel pressure in their heads and hear ringing in their ears. It causes them to get physically sick, to lose sleep, and to lose their balance. They also experience hearing loss, vision loss, and even some brain damage. The symptoms are so mysterious and not consistent with any known disease that many people ignored the symptoms. Doctors didn't know what to diagnose until they started detecting a pattern. The symptoms only affected American and Canadian diplomatic staff in Havana. It didn't affect any locals. It didn't even affect the whole diplomatic staff. The first cases started to emerge in 2016, and the U.S. government finally acknowledged what was going on in 2017. To date, 21 Americans and now 13 Canadians have been afflicted with the so-called Havana syndrome since 2016. The most recent Canadian case came to light just about a month ago. A doctor sent by the United States government to investigate the disease was affected by it himself at his hotel when he went to Cuba. Nobody else in the hotel was affected. What is going on? Nobody knows for sure. The United States investigated in Cuba, but was not able to come to any definitive conclusions. Cuba and China protest their innocence. Cuba says it launched its own investigation and did not uncover any foul play. The United States, in response, cut its diplomatic staff down dramatically in 2017 in reaction to the attacks. So the U.S. now has many fewer people in Havana than it did after the American embassy reopened a few years ago. An American government worker in China has also come down with the so-called Havana syndrome. A lot of people are putting the pieces together and coming up with only one conclusion. It is an attack by the government of Cuba, and now of China, against American and Canadian workers. The theory says that these governments are using some type of audio technology that can be targeted to individual people in their homes. This theory certainly has a lot going for it. That explains why this syndrome affects diplomats from only 2 countries. It explains why the symptoms are not consistent with any known disease on planet Earth. The other theories that have been floated fall well short of explaining the circumstances. Some people say it could be toxins in the food, that it could be due to faulty headphones or listening devices, or that it's due to mass hysteria. In other words, that the victims are either making up their symptoms or making themselves sick. None of these other theories makes any sense. The world of working for a consulate or embassy is a complicated world. Those workers often have their homes invaded, their conversations recorded, their movements monitored, things like that. And of course, many are spies themselves. Since spies often pretend to be low-level government employees, other countries just assume that any low-level employee just might be a spy. So there is a certain risk to this life. Even so, however, if this were an attack, it would be a serious international offense. Diplomats and government workers are often bothered or harassed in other countries, but doing permanent damage to a person's brain is quite a bit more than the norm. Many of the victims and their families, the government workers affected, have expressed frustration that the U.S. isn't taking this seriously enough. But without evidence, the U.S. and Canada have had to tread carefully around this issue since it emerged in 2016. The U.S. didn't acknowledge the problem for over a year. They then investigated the issue and did not find any evidence that this was done on purpose. However, the U.S. has tried to put some pressure on the government of Cuba for not keeping its diplomats safe while in Havana. Without solid evidence, though, they can't do much more. The Cuban government denies that it has been involved and conducted its own investigation. That is a weird and frightening story. Can you imagine being perfectly healthy, 30-something professional, and then, as one person said, bumping into furniture as you walk around, suffering hearing loss, losing your balance, all because of these painful sounds that you hear in your own house? Wow. Time to say hello to a few listeners. Isul from Mexico wrote she's up to about 80% understanding of TV shows in English. She said that's pretty good. Augusto from Brazil, Vitoria, Brazil, has decided to move to London on short notice. Kind of an impulsive decision, he said, but a good one for sure. London is a fantastic city. Anyway, he has listened to about 40 episodes starting at the beginning as preparation for his move. Thanks for writing, Augusto, and good luck in London. Augusto asked for something interesting. He's heard me mention that the show emails have an extra word from each episode defined and explained. And he asked if there's a way to get them all from previous episodes. And the answer is, unfortunately, there really is no place to get all of that. I don't really save them except one by one in the old emails in MailChimp, but who knows, maybe I'll find a way to get them on the website in the future. But if you want to get those extra words, if you want to learn that one extra English phrase in every episode, you should start now by getting on the email list at plainenglish.com/mail, M-A-I-L. You can also follow links to English articles to read more about the main topic. I know a lot of you do that to learn more about topics that you like. Today's word is a phrasal verb, and this one is like a double phrasal verb. To come down with is today's phrase, to come down with. You heard that many American and Canadian diplomats came down with a mysterious illness while in Havana. You also heard that a single American government worker came down with the same thing in China. But the strange thing is that it's only government workers from the US and Canada that have come down with this mysterious illness. It doesn't affect locals or business people or tourists with no ties to the government. By now, you might have guessed that to come down with an illness is to get that illness, to get sick, in other words. I'm coming down with a cold. That's the most popular way to use this phrasal verb. You can also say, you're coming down with something. Just like that. I'm not feeling so great. I think I'm coming down with something. That means you think you're getting sick, but you're not quite sure what it is yet. You know that feeling you get at work or school when it seems like everyone around you is coming down with something? You just know that it's only a matter of time before you come down with the same thing, whatever it is. Right before the holidays, I saw a funny headline. It said that a majority of workers would voluntarily give up one of their own vacation days so that a sick colleague wouldn't come to work. I can sympathize with that. If a coworker is coming down with something, you do not want that person walking around your office or classroom or wherever. That's it for today's episode. Quick reminder before we go that you can get a free audiobook just for listening to Plain English. You can see the details at plainenglish.com/book, B-O-O-K. All the details are there. You just sign up for a free trial to Audible, and you'll get an audiobook to keep forever. If you don't want to subscribe to get more audiobooks after that, just cancel within a month and keep your first book. plainenglish.com/book. See you next time.